going to talk about some of the highlights of the opening statements in the Kaitlin Armstrong case. We'll start with the prosecution.
On May 11th, 2022, at 9:15 p.m. here in Austin, Texas, the last thing Mo did on this earth was scream in terror. You hear those screams. There's a surveillance camera with an audio portion to it. We'll play that for you. You'll hear those screams. Those screams are followed by ah, ah, 2 gunshots. One to the front of the head, one to the side of the head that hits the index finger as it passes. 45 seconds. And we intend to prove to you, you witness in that chair, that after that 4 or 5 seconds silence, Kaitlin Armstrong stood over Mo Wilson and put a 3rd shot right in Mo Wilson's heart.
9:45, not 8:37 when Kaitlin Armstrong was in the area. And the details are horrendous. I feel bad for the family having to hear this. Whoever did this intended to end her life. Whoever did this was making sure that it was done. And this doesn't sound like a frenzied attack. This was an execution.
The 3rd player is Kaitlin Armstrong, who lived with Colin. They had an on again, off again romantic relationship. And it was business partners. They had a business of real estate business and refurbishing trades. Through these witnesses, we're going to give you background on Colin and Kaitlin's relationship. They met in October of 2019 and began a romantic relationship in October 2019. You heard from Colin that at some point in 2021, around the freeze, she moved in with Colin.
She was helping him with his business. He needed her. I think that's an important little bit of information to keep in mind when you're looking at their relationship.
That as a result of that business, they shared an iPad and a laptop that was connected to Colin's phone. So his iMessages from his phone was available on those documents, on those 2 apparatuses. And you would hear from Colin that the relationship was on again, off again, and you would hear that when the relationship was off, they both dated other people, but they continued to live together. I was going to tell you that he had to confront Kaitlin Armstrong, communicate, call him Mo Wilson on her cell phone. And you'll hear Colin tell you that he changed Mo Wilson's name to Christine Walls in his cell phone. In an attempt to secret his communication with Mo Wilson. And you'll see text messages, you'll see cell phone evidence of that phone call that Kaitlin made to Mo Wilson in October 2021.
The phone calls to Mo were in October, the prior year. And it was in the context of Colin and Kaitlin trying to reconcile after he'd had that fling, or whatever you want to call it, with Mo. That was October. And I think that does matter.
That in January 2022, 4 months with his murder, Kaitlin Armstrong goes to the range, gun range in South Austin, 35 and Slaughter. She buys 50 rounds of ammo. You'll see the receipt from the ammo. And you'll see pictures on her cell phone of her practicing with that weapon. 6-hour P365 9mm. 4 months before Mo Wilson was killed.
When you say 4 months before the crime, that sounds terrible. But consider, again, the context, the facts surrounding that. She didn't have the gun prior to that. It wasn't 1 week or 1 month before the crime. It was when at the time she got the weapon. At the time Colin Strickland gave her the gun and told her that she ought to go get training on it. She wasn't a gun person. So she had to go and learn. And going 50 rounds, I don't know, maybe that makes you an expert sharpshooter. Maybe. What do you think? So this isn't how it sounds.
Around the May 2nd, 2022 area, time frame, Colin Strickland left Austin in late April, and he was gone for about 30 days. He was in California. There was a bike gravel race in San Diego area. Colin will testify that during that late April, early May 2nd deadline, that his communication with Mo began to ramp up. Otherwise, they started to communicate a little bit more than they had in the past. And during this time period, when Colin's out on the road in California, texting Mo more, you would learn from his witness chair that Kaitlin Armstrong is back home in Austin near that laptop and that iPad that has access to iMessages to his information. Now, some very important things happened on May 2nd. A couple of things. On May 2nd, and you'll learn some cell data information, cell phone records. Kaitlin Armstrong logged in to Colin Strickland's Gmail account and Instagram from her phone. So she had access to this information. And another important thing happened on May 2nd. Kaitlin Armstrong, on her phone, you be correct, looked up Mo Wilson on her phone. And she looked up pictures of Mo Wilson on her phone on May 2nd, 9 days before Mo was killed. And you'll learn that Colin leaves California and goes to Arizona, to Tucson, I believe. And that Kaitlin decides to fly to Arizona after looking up Mo on May 2nd. She gets to Arizona, and her and Colin drive back. They arrived back in Austin.
This would explain how she knew that Colin and Mo were communicating, or it would suggest that she knew. She says she didn't know, but this could prove otherwise. It begs a question though. If Colin was so concerned about keeping his communications with Mo secret that he changed her name in his phone to hide it from Kaitlin, then why did he not take other steps? He knows that these devices are connected. He would know what Kaitlin has access to and what she doesn't. Why not hide things there as well?
One of the things that Kaitlin Armstrong does on May 9th, 2 days before Mo Wilson is killed, she looks her up on an app called Snark. Strava app is an app that allows you to look at a person's activity.
The allegation is that Kaitlin looked up Mo on the Strava app. My question is, from what device? Was that her phone? Was it the iPad? What device was that? And the reason that matters is Because if it's a device that both parties have access to, meaning Kaitlin and Colin, then you'd have to show which one of them accessed that information.
Now, you learn from the Strava people that the Strava app has a safety feature. You can put the safety feature on. When you're leaving home, you can post your ride through the mountains. But put the safety feature on, it starts a few blocks from your home. If you don't put the safety feature on, it gives a pretty close general location of where you begin your ride and where you end your ride. And you'll learn from the testimony from the witness here that when Mo Wilson was in Austin, she did not activate her safety feature.
Well, that's important. Mo did not turn on the safety feature, which means that the app will only show her general location or close to her location. So it's not going to show, if she goes for a bike ride, that she's at a particular address in a particular apartment. So this is an interesting piece of information, and I'm actually wondering why they're presenting it, unless he misspoke or I misheard.
Cash stayed in a garage apartment at 1708B Maple Drive. 1708, she stayed in B.
So if you went to that address, would you know that there were apartments? Would it be easy to figure out which one belonged to Cash, where Mo was staying?
May 10th, the day that Mo Wilson arrived in Austin, you heard testimony that Kaitlin Armstrong looked up Mo on Strava 4 different times. This is the day before Mo was killed.
So if that was Kaitlin and not Colin who looked her up on the app, then this is really bad. It would explain how she knew that Mo was in town and in what area she was in.
And we're going to go to May 11th, the day Mo Wilson was murdered. Now, during that day, Colin and Mo began to text each other. And you'll see those text messages. They're trying to hook up together. We go back and forth about what time, where we're going to go, and things like that. You'll see those text messages. And Colin will tell you that later on that day, 3 o'clock range, he leaves on the motorcycle to go to the dentist. And while he's out at the dentist visit, him and Mo finalized their plans to hook up for the evening and go to a D-Day food. And he would testify that texting was on his iPhone. It was connected through iMessages to that iPad and laptop back at the home. And you would get cell data records to show that Kaitlin Armstrong was back at home at this time.
What happened between Kaitlin and Colin during their trip to Arizona? It wasn't until after that trip and right after that trip that somebody's looking up Mo. So that escalation didn't happen till right after that trip. What happened then? And in this instance of looking at the app, was it because Kaitlin didn't trust that Colin was really at the dentist? Or was she specifically looking for where Mo was?
We're going to tell you what Mo Wilson was doing the last day of her life. Before she went swimming, one of the last things she did on this river was what she loved to do. She went on a 3-mile bike ride from 123, and she arrived back at 423. We know that because she posted it on Strava, and we know that because you'll also be presenting evidence that her cell phone data, which has locations, follows her and shows where she starts and where she goes, her whole route, and what she gets back to.
This was May 11th, not May 10th, when Mo was looked up 4 times.
Drops Mo off at 8:35 p.m. You'll hear witnesses talk about his cell phone. Gets him right there in that alley. It's an alley behind the main house. Not a street, an alley. 8:35, he drops her off. And Kaitlin goes home. And he's home at 9:15 when those gunshots go off. And we know he's home because he witnesses track him on his cell phone. He does stop at 8:38 on MLK, a few blocks from dropping Mo off. And he texts Kaitlin about that area he was running. Finished. Want to get something to eat? She doesn't respond. A few later, learn that she doesn't respond to her cell phone.
Having her cell phone off is damning. I'd like to know how she's going to explain that.
He goes home. He receives a phone call about 9 o'clock. You'll hear from the person who called him. They was on the phone for 8 minutes. You see cell phone records proving it. And then at 9:21, Colin sends Kaitlin one last text message. Finish? Yeah. Get something to eat. I'm going home. And cell phone location puts Colin at his home miles away from 1708 Maple Drive. That's how we know where he is.
That Colin was actually talking and texting on the phone is important because it squashes the potential argument that, oh, his phone was at home, not necessarily him. It shows he was with the phone, which was at the residence. Next, we're going to hear about what Mo was doing just before the crime.
She unlocks the door at 8:36. She goes in her apartment. And you were here from the cell data expert and cell phone records that from 8:37 p.m., almost a minute after the door opens, she's on her phone. You're able to track her phone. She's looking at her phone. She's on her phone, calling at 8:37, 1 minute later, on her phone. And she stays on her phone until 9:13.
This suggests she wasn't there with other company.
Consequently, you will also learn that within 4 or 5 feet of those stairs, there's a fence and a driveway. You will learn that at 8:37 p.m., 1 minute after she opened that door, Kaitlin Armstrong's Jeep was seen going through that alley. 1 minute. Trying to open that door 1 minute later, you see that Jeep going through that alley. You'll see that on video surveillance camera. 1 minute. 36, 8:37, 8:38, Colin a few blocks away, texting. You hear all that from witness. Now,
He's saying the SUV was going through the alleyway, which is different from saying it was stopped in the alleyway.
Mo sends her last message out at 9:13 p.m. She sent a text message to a podcaster. She arrives home and sees Mo on the floor. She sees her legs. She'll testify. She thought Mo had been on a strenuous ride and was laying on the floor, stretching, relaxing. And she'll testify as she gets closer and sees blood and freaks out. And at 9:54 p.m., they canvassed the area for surveillance, videos, and they locate a black Jeep with a very distinct bicycle rack with 3 racks on it at 8:37 p.m. In an alley, about 5 feet of cash stairs. It's a little fence that separates them. 8:37. It's the Jeep I was just telling you about. Passing that alley. 1 minute after she opened that door. We're going to present evidence to you. That's Kaitlin Armstrong's Jeep.
Interesting how he's putting this piece of information here. Cash got home at 9:54 p.m. and they're bringing up Kaitlin's SUV going through the alleyway at 8:37. And I note here he's repeating himself. This is intentional. This guy is not absent-minded. He's not rambling. It's coherent. He's putting it here on purpose, and he's repeating himself on purpose. He wants to make sure if that jury didn't hear it the first time, they'll hear it the second or the third or the fourth time. I expect he'll do this during the trial, which I wish we could see, but we can't.
The police also sent somebody to Colin's house for an investigation. To sit on the house and watch that house while they were interviewing Colin.
I put this here because in my last video, I said, well, didn't they watch the house? Apparently they did.
At Colin and Caitlin's home, they find two things that are very important to this case. Two guns. One, Smith, it's Colin's gun. They find a 9mm 6-hour P365 that belonged to Kaitlin Armstrong. That gun is later identified through ballistics as a firearm that was used to kill both of them.
Two people had access to those weapons. Who happens to have ownership of the weapon doesn't really matter. It matters who had access.
Go to Uber's airport on 13th, but the next day on May 14th, she flies from Austin to Houston and from Houston to New York City. You'll see the flight receipts. And you'll learn that on May 18th, a few days later, and you'll also learn that she has a sister, Armstrong, that lived in New York, New Jersey. On May 18th, you'll be presented testimony of her going online, using her credit card, her email, buying a plane ticket to Costa Rica with her sister's name listed as the passenger on May 18th. And on that same day, she flies to Costa Rica using her sister Kaitlin Armstrong passport.
Let's talk about post-defense behavior. It does matter, even if the person is not charged. It matters a lot. By itself, it can't tell you whether somebody's guilty or not. There are people who can commit horrendous crimes and then go to work and carry on as normal. What it tells you is something about that person's personality. Less experienced criminals do things like don't go to work the next day, flee to Costa Rica, go into hiding. They're nervous, they're tired, whereas a more experienced criminal may be very cold. So it does matter. And one of the concepts to consider when looking at post-defense behavior is consciousness of guilt. There are behaviors that can just telegraph loud and clear that the person knows that they did something wrong. And fleeing or going into hiding, and both Kaitlin and Colin went into hiding, it could be perceived as consciousness of guilt. It could be perceived as fear. There could be a lot of other explanations, but it does matter. It is relevant. Her second escape attempt, I don't think is the same thing. It doesn't fall into the same sort of category. And the fact that she used her sister's passport, I think is an important issue. She can't say, well, I just decided to go on a trip and get away for a while. If that's the case, you don't use your sister's passport.
You'll see Kaitlin Armstrong cell phone. These cell phone people tell you they can get your stuff from your cell phone, unlock your cell phone through the cloud, all kind of ways. you'll see her cell phone and a GPS that I'm going to tell you about is in her Jeep. You'll see them traveling that day, side by side, so you can verify the accuracy of it. And you'll also see from the cell phone people that at 7:30 p.m., 7:30 p.m. on May 11th, turn the cell phone on. Turn it off. By the way, June 29th, you get smart together, Courtroom, get a buddy, write your cell phone on the phone. What cell phone evidence to tell you. And also, you'll see that at 9:55, approximately 35 minutes or so, after you hear that scream on that audio and the ring camera, her cell phone is turned back on. And it's at her house in South Austin.
This is, again, information that he is repeating. When he has something damning, he's going to drive it home to the jury. I think Kaitlin Armstrong is in trouble, not only because of the facts, but because this prosecutor knows how to work it.
Now, I told you the police was cameras, the video surveillance. You'll see one video surveillance camera of Colin leaving that motorcycle at 8:36 once he dropped him off at Cass's park. Got him one time on video camera. Now, there's 4 video surveillance cameras that captures Kaitlin Armstrong circling Cass's house at 17:08 May for about an hour before the murder. It's circling. One camera catches it 3 or 4 times. It's passing up down the field.
17:08 is 8 minutes after 5. Now, while this is hours before the crime, it is still significant. We don't know whether she was searching for Mo's location or if she was searching for Colin because she suspected that that's where he was. Either way, the behavior, it's stalking behavior. It does raise a question, though. If she's picked up on cameras all over the place, at this time, at 5:08 p.m., Colin and Mo were picked up by camera, why then is Kaitlin Armstrong or her vehicle not picked up on camera at 9:15 p.m., the time of the crime?
And this Jeep here had an infotainment center. And within that infotainment center, there's GPS. You hear that Kaitlin Armstrong Jeep had an infotainment center with a GPS system in it. GPS shows time and location data. You'll see an animation of her driving down Lamar with the dots. Starting about 6 p.m. She's tracking her all over the city, North Austin, driving around. You'll see her circling the block around the house. And you'll see the experts look at the video ring time, GPS on the Jeep time to verify the accuracy. For example, GPS says she's on this street, ring time says this. You see that side by side. Now, GPS has what they call trip logs. Everybody trip log. Trip log cuts off and keeps it on. The car is on. You hear about trip log 99, trip log 100. Trip log 99 stops at 8:40 p.m. GPS location puts Kaitlin Armstrong Jeep in an alley about 15, 20 yards from those stairs that Mo Wilson went up 8:36. GPS guy will testify that at 9:17 p.m., 2 minutes after those fatal shots, trip log 100 starts. That Jeep starts up and starts to move. 2 minutes later, just within 20 yards from the stairs where the Jeep is parked. It's parked up at 8:40, no activity, turned off. 2 minutes after the murder, that Jeep is back home and it's gone.
He keeps finding ways to repeat this. He's going to drive it home. This does confirm it was her vehicle. And unless she can prove that somebody else was driving it, she's going to have a tough time explaining this. Now, technically, she doesn't have to explain anything. The burden is on the state to prove. But boy, you'd want to answer to that.
We followed this Jeep on GPS all the way to the home in South Austin. You see that it stopped by an apartment complex into a dumpster. On the way home, stopped by the dumpster for a minute. GPS shows the car moving when it stops. Miles per hour, how fast it's going, it's not moving at all. You see her go up to that dumpster, by the apartment complex, stop for a few minutes, and you're going to see her drive off home, cut that Jeep off, and trip log 100 is going to end. Right around 9:55 p.m.
Ooh, this is new information to me anyway. I didn't know this about the dumpster. I hope they searched it. Does anyone know if they did and what they found, if anything?
You're going to hear from a ballistics and 2 marks expert. There were 3 shell casings and 3 projectiles covered at the scene. One of the projectiles was too mangled to compare. So he had 3 shell casings, 2 projectiles he used for comparison. So they got those 2 guns that they got from the search warrant. Coutlin's gun and Kaitlin's 6-hour P365 9mm. They test fired those guns and compared those test fires casings to those 5 found at the scene. From that chair, the ballistics guy is going to tell you how that's going to exclude. Kaitlin's gun were identified. The result will show that those casings, test casings, were identified as being the same as fired from that gun.
I think we all expected this. They're still going to have to show whose hand it was in.
You hear that they swabbed DNA from Mo Wilson's bike, which they found in some weeds, maybe 10 yards from the bottom of those stairs, cut 4 or 5 yards from where that car was parked at 840, and some bamboo weeds. They found her bike. You will find that the bike weighs about 5 or 6 pounds. You can pick it up with one hand. You'll find that it's a very expensive bike, thousands of dollars. And you remember that earlier she was riding this bike. Now, the DNA expert will tell you that she took DNA from Mo Wilson, Kaitlin Armstrong, and Colin Strickson to compare to the DNA on that bike. Now, they found DNA on the handlebars. Now, the DNA expert will tell you that they don't say that's the person. They got likelihood ratio. Uninformative, 5 categories. Uninformative with the lowest, strongly, strong, and very strong likelihood. That's how they keep it down. You will find, or she'll testify, that the DNA on the handlebars was a very strong likelihood that the DNA on the handlebars included DNA from Kaitlin Armstrong. Strong. and the DNA expert will testify that with regards to the DNA on the seat of the bike, that there's a very strong likelihood that the DNA on the seat of the bike included DNA from Kaitlin Armstrong. Very strong, highest category to have.
The defense might say, but it's not 100%. It's only strong or very strong. They like to do that. They like to go there. The jury's going to hear what the numbers are, what the possibilities are. And it's not good for Kaitlin Armstrong. The defense may also argue cross-contamination. And cross-contamination is a thing. It does happen. But in order for that argument to fly, they would also have to have found Colin Strickland's DNA. If his DNA was also found, the defense would be screaming about that. We're going to see in a couple of minutes what they have to say in their opening statement.
When we present this evidence to you through these 40 witnesses here, we're going to ask you to find Kaitlin Armstrong guilty of murdering Mo Wilson. Thank you so much for your time.
Now we hear from the defense. It's going to get hot.
You may already have your mind made up. I know Detective Richard Spittler with the Austin Police Department certainly did, just hours into his investigation.
I agree. It certainly does seem like Spittler had tunnel vision. The way Kaitlin Armstrong was treated as compared with Colin Strickland was completely different right from the get-go, even though most investigators would see Strickland as the number one suspect in the beginning. The objections and frustrations start right from the get-go, and they get worse. For a lot of them, I don't have a lot to say. I'm just showing you. It gets pretty heated by the end. And the defense lawyer is defiant.
I want to talk to you about reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is doubt that is supported.
He's made an argument about the way of the evidence. He's not giving a rollback.
Try to open the statement with the evidence will show.
I plan to, Your Honor. Reasonable doubt is doubt that is supported by reason and common sense. And I expect at the end of this trial that we will be talking about doubt, what that is. But for purposes of my remarks to you this morning, I want to talk to you about reason and common sense. Now, reason.
Because once again, that's not a roadmap for evidence. That's argument.
Now, the state just discussed with you what you will see, what you will hear about, what you will hear throughout the course of this trial. But I want to talk to you about what you didn't hear about. What you didn't hear about. You didn't hear that not one witness saw Kaitlin Armstrong allegedly commit this murder. Not one. Because there isn't one. You didn't hear.
I'm not objecting again. He's supposed to be presenting the evidence that he's going to show, not evidence that he's not going to show. Once again, this is an argument.
I can't count how many times I've heard this argument, and every time I have to fight to not roll my eyes.
You won't hear, and you didn't hear, about any camera footage showing Kaitlin Armstrong at the scene of this shooting. Despite there being tons of cameras in the area, and you heard opening statements about all the cameras that were in the immediate vicinity of the scene of that shooting, not one captures Kaitlin Armstrong at that scene. Because there isn't.
There would be something, and you've got to wonder why there's not.
You did not hear about any direct evidence showing Kaitlin Armstrong is responsible for this crime, because there isn't any.
This is another common remark. If you go to bed at night and it's clear out, and you wake up in the morning and there's snow on the ground, you can safely conclude that it snowed.
Now you will hear at the time Kaitlin left Austin to go to New York and then to Costa Rica, she would have no reason to know about anyone that was present in this case. That the Austin Police Department told her she was free to go. She was free to go. That's what you will hear. You will hear that Kate is passionate about traveling. She's passionate about yoga. And you're going to hear that she was totally comfortable traveling to far-off locations that intrigued her at the drop of a hat, on a moment's notice. That's what you'll hear. And you'll hear in the days following the shooting, weird things were happening to Kate at her home, documented things. Things that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety, and that ultimately led to her decision to leave Austin.
Yes, she could go. She could leave if she wanted to. There was no reason why she couldn't. And she didn't leave the country right away either. And there were things happening around the house that would cause anyone to fear for their safety immediately after the crime. And you know what else? If she didn't do this, then she'd have to wonder, at least part of her would have to wonder if Colin did it. And if so, whether or not she was at risk from him. And if I haven't said it already, I'll say it here. Colin Strickland also left Austin and also went into hiding. But the fact that she used her sister's passport, that puts a bit of a glitch in the explanation now, doesn't it?
So let's talk about some of the witnesses that you may hear about over the course of this trial. Detective Richard Spidler. Now, he's the detective who, prior to the investigation of this case, had never served as a lead detective in a murder investigation. Not one. But I'm sure he did very well on his exams.
That last remark was a cheap shot, and it wasn't necessary. Personally, I think this is not a good look for the defense. Attacking the experience of investigators is also not uncommon. So far, this is a very vanilla opening statement. So attacking investigators' experience is not uncommon, and sometimes there's even a place for that. But I think this is a weak argument. And as for experience, everyone has to have their first case, even lawyers.
Now, the state is going to attempt to tie Miss Armstrong to this shooting through purported forensic science. And you'll hear from the DNA analyst that examined some items that were collected in this case. And you will hear from a ballistic technician who will tell you he eyeballed some shell casings that were submitted in this case and determined that they were not inconsistent with a firearm that was taken from the home of Kate and Colin.
Eyeballed? Come on. They use a microscope. And the term inconsistent, that's the term.
But you will also hear from experts. And I want you to listen when those experts tell you DNA reporting can mean very little. And ballistic science isn't a science at all. And it's not highly regarded by members of the general scientific.
I'm going to object to that. There's no evidence that it's not highly regarded by the general science community just because you can find one or two people to say that.
Judge, these are opening remarks. This is what we expect the evidence to show. This is proper argument.
I agree with the prosecutor on this one. Now, the judge overruled it. This open isn't going so hot.
Before that objection was overruled, we were talking about ballistic science and how that is far from the gold standard that you see it depicted as on TV. Now, the states and the officers with the Austin Police Department and the scientists that they employed, they were so desperate to keep Kaitlin Armstrong in their crosshairs that they had tunnel vision.
Before that objection was overruled. Ooh. Yeah, I think they had tunnel vision too. But you know, it's hard to hear the arguments above the snark.
Words and phrases are meaningless unless jurors like you draw a hard line in the sand. Phrases like presumption of innocence,
Once again, he's making an argument.
proof beyond any reasonable doubt.
Judge, once again, he's making an argument.
Judge, this is the burden of proof. If the state is apprehensive about the jury hearing about
I'm apprehensive about him not giving a roadmap, giving an argument in open statement. That's what I'm apprehensive about.
If the state is apprehensive about the jury hearing, the place is full of fumes and the guy's throwing matches around. And a few seconds later, this.
and I want you to approach that task.
Judge, once again, he's talking about how the jury weighs evidence. He's not talking about the foundation of his claim, what he expects to prove.
Judge, this is appropriate argument. Your Honor,
Opening statement.
I didn't hear the first
I
room.
just said this is opening statement. I haven't made a ruling, but I would ask again that you could find your remarks to the appropriate statements for this juncture of the trial.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And mere seconds later, again and again and again. In the next clip, watch for these expressions. And stay to the very end of the video, because at the very end, he makes a doozy expression both with his face and his body language.
The state has a job to do. We have a job to do. And you stand between us. And we stand.
Judge, that's not opening statement.
Objection sustained.
And again,
A woman who is trapped in a nightmare of circumstantial evidence.
That's not opening statement.
Judge,
That's
I'm
argument.
discussing the evidence. And that it
You're
is
discussing her
circumstantial.
state of mind. That's not evidence.
The statement is sustained.
Okay.
they're liking this so much, they do it again.
You had your chance. You could have been excused on Monday.
Judge, that's not opening statement.
Objection sustained.
But you told us you could be fair.
That's the same line of question. It's not opening statement.
Are we concluding this case?
I'm trying to wrap it up, Your Honor.
And you're not doing opening statement.
Let's wrap it up appropriately as far as what the evidence from your portion of the trial or what you intend to show or think will be shown to the jury.
I'm trying to get there, Your Honor. So I
Without
interrupt.
argument.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Your Honor. And you will have the conclusion that the state has fallen short of its burden.
Judge, once again, every time you sustain, he gets up and says the same thing. He's making arguments about how they weigh the evidence at the end of the trial.
Judge,
That's not opening statement.
it is the burden of proof, Your Honor, that the jury has in this case. If the state is apprehensive about the burden of proof that they've accepted,
There's a time and place to talk about the burden of proof. It's not opening statement.
Let me stop. If there are no further
The prosecution repeated himself, but that was strategic. This guy, he hasn't said much at all. He did make a couple of good points, and you may only need one very good point. But all in all, this opening statement is not so hot. At the end of this section, watch his body language. At the very, very end when he's done. After you watch it the first time, I'm going to slow the video down and play it again so that it's easier for you to see it.
when you look at the evidence, you will come to a just verdict. And that just verdict, we trust, will be a verdict of not guilty.
That's it for this one. See you in the comments.